Okay, but we are going, so it's so good to see you. It is great that you're here and that everyone was safe and that we went through this experience together. We'll have something to talk about. We can have a party later on to celebrate it. But it's good that we're here because we're going to be starting a new series of things, of looking at people just like you and me. Do you know there are people just like you and me in the Bible? And God, for some reason, for some strange reason, likes to use people just like you and me. Ordinary, garden variety people. And I call them, and I call myself, the great unknowns. These are people that we're going to talk about a guy today, and I will bet you all the money in my wallet that nobody knows this guy's name, okay? When it comes time, the money is right here. It is for the taking, okay? So get all your neurons, juiced up, because this is a guy who changed history. He really is a guy who changed history. He had a very important role to play, but nobody remembers his name. Nobody even thinks about what he did. And maybe if you even did think a little bit about what he did, we probably don't know how he did it. It's so strange. So, what are these people? The first one is from the story of Esther. This is the guy. Now, anybody know the story of Esther? Okay, you know the story of Esther. Esther was Queen of Persia. Okay, and so we're going to look at that story. We're going to go through the backstory of it and find this guy. You got to really do some spade work to find this guy. But the main characters are, you think about, is Cyrus. He's the guy who started the whole Persian Empire, okay? And the next guy, the king, was this guy Xerxes. Now, when I say these guys were the king, this is not just a little guy. This is the man, okay? Almost like a worldwide kingdom. And he had a queen, and her name was Vashti. And Vashti was the queen, but she went to the wrong schools and decided that it wasn't proper for her to come when the king called her. So she said, no. And when you said no to the king, guess what happened to you? No happened to you. So that he kicked her out, and now they said, I love this part of the Bible. I love this. This is so good. A bunch of guys get together. Okay, what happens when a bunch of guys get together? Yeah, nothing good. Right. They talk and they come up with a cockamamie idea. Okay, this is the big idea. Okay, let's go find a queen. Okay, it's sort of like that TV show, Queen for a Day. No. And so they send out and they bring all these women in, and they have, it makes Shark Tank or, these singing shows, these talent shows look like nothing. And they said, yeah, you're one. Oh, no, yes. And what did they do for these women that they selected? They put them through a whole program, months and months of training and beauty and everything. And of all the people they picked, they went through, Esther comes out on top. She was not just beautiful on the outside, but she had an inner glow that makes Mary Kay Cosmetics look stupid. Okay, she just beamed from the inside. And she had a friend. Remember his name? Mordecai. Did you know? What? Her uncle. Why was he around? Because her parents were dead. She was orphaned, young. And so here she is. She becomes queen. Mordecai is there, and he actually does something that helps the king and warns him of a plot, and life is good. Life is really good until, dun, 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 we have evil Haman. Everybody go boo. Boo. Okay, thumbs down, right? This is Haman. And Haman's idea was to do what? The Jews, pooey, we're going to stomp on them. We're going to get rid of them. They're the cause of all the trouble. And why does he feel this way? Because Haman wouldn't bow down to him. He said, you're not going to bow down to me. I'll make you bow down. I'll put your face in the dirt. We're going to get rid of all the Jews. Now you think, well, that's back then. That's, no, that never happened in modern times. Guess it did. In the Nazis, there's something called Kristall, which is the night of broken glass. They had this idea, again, a bunch of guys get together and they say, hey, we want to get rid of the Jews, so on November 9th, we're all just going to go out and torch their houses. We're going to torch their synagogues. We're going to arrest over 30,000 of them. It happens. And this happened in the Persian Empire, just to sort of let you see where it is. It's actually in where modern day Iran is that there was this city. This is where all this takes place, in the capital city and in sort of the castle. And we have, this is a 3D rendering of what it might have looked like that is based on archaeological discovery. It is a huge complex of buildings. And this was, this wasn't a couple of guys, in a tent. This was a big deal, a big city. Remember this area. This is the court of the king. That's where all of what we're about to talk about happens. And it was this gateway, and it was a statement of power, the power of the government. It was a statement of the fact that, well, if you were coming from a foreign country, hey, you better, stand up and fly right. And also, if for just regular people, guess who's in charge? And in all of this is when the announcement comes that Haman has gotten the king to sign this thing that says, we're going to kill all the Jews. So Mordecai learns of all of this. And what does Mordecai do? Tears his clothes and does what? What's up with that? What does that mean? Means
he's ready to fight?
Not so much ready to fight. It's a good idea, but it's what is it? Mourning. It's suffering. It's when you get the worst news. When you get the absolute worst piece of information. It's when that phone call comes at 12:30 that says that your dad has died. It's when you get that call from the doctor that says that biopsy we took is a melanoma. This is that kind of a statement. This is a sign, it's an outward sign that says, life just kicked me in the gut. You ever been there? You probably didn't tear your clothes. You probably didn't run around and put ashes on your head. But people could tell. This was a way to communicate without talking. And he said, everything, it's uncomfortable. It's a symbol of pain. And but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't, I'm just putting the wallet away. Don't worry. The money's still there. He says he was out, he went out into the city. He just doesn't go into his closet. He says he went into the city. And that's where he did his wailing. He didn't do it in private. This is a big deal. This is a public thing. This is a public proclamation. And so he does public mourning. When Rick and Kay Warren's son, Matthew, committed suicide at the age of, I think, 25. Matthew had been born with some, Kay had been very sick during the pregnancy, and he was born outwardly okay, but he had some problems mentally and emotionally, and he struggled all of his life with depression. And let me tell you, Rick and Kay got all the resources in the world, okay? They didn't have to worry about the copay. They could call upon the best doctors, the best psychiatrists, the best people, but it wasn't enough. And one night, Matthew listened to those voices and killed himself. Now, let me tell you, Matthew was a follower of Christ. There's no doubt about where he is. But it just, for himself, it was a tragedy. And, Rick and Kay, Saddleback Church, 30,000 people on a Sunday, another 30,000 online, 70,000 people in small groups around the world. They didn't try to hide it. My heart went out to them, but they didn't try to hide it. They publicly mourned. Yes, he stepped down from the pulpit and didn't preach for a while, but he publicly mourned. That's what Mordecai is doing. He is publicly mourning. And we don't like to hear this. It's like, oh, I got to put on this front, right? Everything's okay, right? Well, it's not okay. So he wails bitterly. He doesn't try to control or compose himself. And here he's the uncle of the queen, and he's outside the palace. He only went so far. Now so he went to the king's gate because he couldn't go any further because, hey, you don't dress like that. You don't act like that in front of the king or in his palace. So he only went so far. This is a diagram of the palace, and these different color areas show. Remember that big gate with the things? Well, that's right there, okay? So he's right outside the gate, right here. Now, we have these other areas, but the two areas I want to point out are down here. I don't know what color this is. I'm colorblind. But that's the harem. That's where the women would be. So Esther is probably there, but she might have been, in that purple area, which is the palace area. So, he's up here and she's way down here. So, what happens next? Esther gets the word. Her servants, and the eunuchs, these are men who served around in the palace, when they came and they told her that Mordecai is in sackcloth and ashes, what does she do? She sends clothes. Now, why would she send clothes? So he can come in, yeah. Hey, Uncle Morty, come on in, we'll sit down, we'll have a latte, and I'd like to hear more about it. But he refuses. He refuses to accept it. And then this is where our unknown guy comes. Anybody, you're looking in your Bible, no fair.
I was going to say the eunuch anyway, but
Well,
before I knew his name.
but his name. Don't you wish you had a name like this? This is a great name. This is a name. Hathak. Hathak. Hey, Hat. Did they call him Hattie? I don't know. Or Kak. Esther summoned Hathak, this totally unknown guy, okay? Nobody has named their kid Hathak. I mean, we got Pauls and we got Peters and we got Johns and, you know, we don't have any Chesters anymore, thank the Lord. But he said Hathak, who was not one of her eunuchs, one of the king's eunuchs. And he had to summon him, which means what?
Order.
Had to order him, and he wasn't right there. He wasn't in the cubicle next to hers. It wasn't in the same area. We're gonna walk through this because this is important. Wherever she's at, she sends word. What's this guy got to do? Does he pick up the phone?
No,
Does he send a text? Does he punch the intercom? What does he do?
it's the walk.
He's got to walk.
A long way.
He's got to come. So he comes. He responds to the king. He responds to the queen. Excuse me. Now, he could have said, nah. I'm one of the king's eunuchs. I'm not a eunuch for the queen, after all. You know, I'm up there. I'm up high. No, he doesn't do that. He responds. He responds, and she orders him to find out what's going on and why. She asks him, says, I don't know what's going on, but I'm depending on you to find out. So, what does Hathak do? He walks. He travels. And we don't know how long it took him to go through. You know, we don't know if they had, metal detectors like they have at the airports. You know, did he have to show proof of ID? So he went out to the open square of the city, and Mordecai told him, remember that path? He had to go through the different parts of the palace. It wasn't immediate. And Esther's got to wait, because she's not going to know it immediately either. So he goes out, and Mordecai tells him some of what was going on. No, tells him everything. Everything. And think of all the details. He tells him all the stuff, you know, the amount of money, the promises. And he also had a copy of the edict about the annihilation. What a word. So he gives all of that to Hathak. And he says to Hathak, hey, you tell Esther she's got to get involved. And he brings all that back. Think about that. He didn't pull out his phone and say, okay, Mordecai, I'm going to take a video of you right now. Okay, go. This is Mordecai. Mordecai, tell the message to Esther. No, what did he do? He had to remember all this stuff. He had to be involved in the details. He had to know what was going on. And he reported back. He went through that same pathway through everything else. He had to walk by the Starbucks kiosk that they had there. You know, he had to go and find out and take and report it. It says that he reported. What does it mean to report? Told her what? Told her what Mordecai said. He wasn't a talking head like you got on the internet, which says, this is what happened. They spend 30 seconds on that, and then 27 minutes telling you what it means. Right? No, he didn't do that. He went back and reported in the word. You're not old enough to remember this, but there was a show on TV called Dragnet, and they would say, just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. So what does Esther gets all this information, and then she instructs Hathak what to do. Now, think about this. You got Mordecai out there in the street or in the front, and you got Esther here, right? And what's Hathak's role?
Go back and forth.
He's a go-between, right? What? An intermediary. He's not a negotiator. He's basically a FedEx package. Okay? He's a walking, living, breathing FedEx package. He picks up something from one, goes, delivers it, it gets filled up, sealed, and gets sent back. And he does this over and over and over. So, when, when she instructs him what to say to Mordecai, would they play pickleball? Okay. Esther's words were reported back to Malachi. And then he sent an answer back. The reason it's like pickleball is, what's the point of pickleball? They hit the ball back and forth over the net, right? Yeah. That's what they're doing. They're hitting the ball over the net. And Hathak is the ball. Okay, he keeps bouncing. Again, none of you are old enough to remember Pong, but there was this thing with this ball or a dot, and it hit something, it'd go the other way, boop, boop, right? You're not old enough to remember that, but that was like that. He was like a Pong. And Mordecai listen to the message. This is amazing. Mordecai does not say the message to Esther. He gives the message to Hathak, who then delivers the message to Esther. And what's that message? Do not think that because you are in the king's house that you alone of all the Jews will escape. Put in modern terms, you ain't got long to live, baby. You are not going to escape this just because you're where you live. When the storm came over this week, I live in Lake Wales. Oh, the crown jewel of the ridge. If you think I'm making that up, go to the Lake Wales website, look at the logo for Lake Wales, and the words that describe Lake Wales, the almighty, the epicenter of everything in the universe, is the crown jewel of the ridge. Somebody was on the wrong stuff when they wrote that. And the reason I know that is because Lake Wales is the name of the town, right? And we have what in Lake Wales, the town? A lake. And what's that lake called? Lake Wales, right? No, it's not. Because Lake Wales, the lake, is spelled different than Lake Wales, the town. Somebody had dyslexia. I don't know what was going on. But anyway, Hathak is just this messenger. And Mordecai says, you're not going to escape this. And he takes the message back to Esther. So Esther then says, okay, I get it. I've got a part to play. Now, how did Esther know she had a part to play? Because Mordecai, her uncle, came But then Hathak was going back and forth. Hathak, this unknown guy. And she says, go out there and get all the Jews and fast, don't eat. We're going to fast, and when it's done, I'm going to go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. You think, well, that's an odd thing to say. Well, it's not, because if you went in front of the king without him asking you to come, you ain't got long to live, baby, again, unless he says it's okay. So Mordecai gets the message. He's done his job. Esther now knows what's going on. She understands the seriousness of it, that it's coming like a freight train. And so he went away and followed Esther's instructions. But none of this happens without Hathak, does it? It doesn't happen. Look at what Hathak did. He received direction. He carried it out. He was faithful. He listened. Trying to find somebody to listen? Wow. And then he reported it. He was accurate, and he wasn't afraid to do it again and again and again. He never threw down his ID badge and sat down with his friends and said, I've had it. What's up with this Mordecai and Esther? What's wrong with them? I mean, yeah, I hear this, but back and forth, back and forth. Have you ever gotten tired or bored by doing the same thing over and over again?
Yes.
But he didn't. He didn't give up. He didn't stop. He didn't say, oh, I'm frustrated. No, he stayed at the task. He didn't give up. He didn't take a break. He didn't, say, okay, Esther, I'll go deliver this, but, my Dunkin' Donuts is getting kind of low, so I'm going to stop in there. And, oh, by the way, we're unionized, so I get a 15-minute break every so often. And, I've walked so many steps, and, my hip is hurting, my knee is hurt. No, he didn't stop. He didn't stop. He didn't take a break. Another thing, and this is for all us Americans, he didn't get distracted. How easy is it for you to get distracted? I don't know about you. I'm like, I'm all over the place in my brain. But he stayed at the task, and he went. He didn't get distracted. Another thing he didn't do is he didn't change the message. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to edit it. He didn't try to condense it. He didn't try to expand on it. He gave the message that was given to him. He did his job. And unlike us Americans, he didn't add his 2 cents. We got our 2 cents. Somebody you see something on the internet, and what have you got to do? Add your 2 cents, right? Yep. Sure. I mean, that's what it's there for. They're expecting me. They want to know my take. Another couple of things. When it was all over, he didn't get an attaboy. There's no record of, oh, well done, good and faithful Hathak. He didn't get a bonus. He didn't get brought up in front of all the other eunuchs. Now, we all know what a eunuch is, right? It's a man who's been demanified. That's the technical term, okay? He didn't let anything stop him. And this wasn't just, a day at the park. This was during difficult times. It was during difficult times. You got to stay focused. You got to stay on the path. You got to know where you're going and keep your sights there. And Hathak did all that and more. He just did his job. There's the path over and over. It wasn't like he went somewhere new. He said, oh, let's take the back road. No, that was it. He did his job, and it was not glamorous. Hey, Hathak, what are you up to? I'm taking a message from Esther to her uncle out there. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes later. Hey, Hathak, what happened? What are you doing now? Well, I talked to that guy out there, and now I'm sending that message back. Are you kidding? Don't you know how important you are? Don't you know you can handle much bigger things than that? No. And it wasn't all that exciting, was it? No. He wasn't getting hundreds of likes on social media for going back and forth. He wasn't taking a TikTok video that had gone viral. He went back and forth. How boring is that? But how important is that? It's very important. And he was taking other people's messages. These weren't his messages. And this guy, he comes out of nowhere, right? Hathak. There's no other message about him. His name appears nowhere else. He pops up like one of these, a drive-through food trailer, right? He pops up and then he's gone. He pops up out of nowhere and he goes back to nowhere. He goes back to nowhere. And he doesn't sit down and text, oh, woe is me. I was important. Oh, I was known. Oh, I did a good thing, an important thing. But now I'm a nobody. No. He was a guy who was attractive and attracted to doing what he was instructed to do. And he stayed at it. So are you and I attracted to do what God has given us to do? Are we pulled towards being the kind of people he wants us to be? Or do we push it away? Are we drawn to being faithful people? We say, you know what, I used to do that, but I'm beyond that now. Or are we going to be the kind of people who move away and reject? Say, I had a conversation this week with a friend. He's a friend. And I wrote something about how God was very kind and faithful to us during the storm. And his response was, well, I'm happy for you, and I don't mean to be an idiot. He used a different adjective. But how can you say that when you have all these other people who have been hurt and lost property? I said, what a great question. Now, I could have, so he's my friend. So I was attracted to him. I wanted to draw myself, not to bring him to me. It was my job to go to him. So I said, you're right. You got a good point. But God's been good to me. Therefore, my job is to be good to people. My job is to respond in loving kindness. How can we reach out to people? Beating them over the head with the gospel is not an effective way to reach anybody these days. Maybe one time that used to work, but not so now. They want to see it. They want to hear it. Hear it in our lives, in our compassion. This guy tells a story. He says, his wife makes corn, and he likes corn. And so when she makes corn, he's all excited. Yeah, do you like corn? You like corn? You know, corn on the cob. And so he comes to the table, and he puts butter on it, and then he puts salt on it, and then he takes this big, juicy, crunchy bite out of it, wipes his lips, turns to his wife, and says, "Boy, was that good butter and salt." Is that what happens? No, what does he say? Good corn. Why do you think Jesus says you are the salt of the earth? It's not about the salt. It's about the corn. We are to live lives that bring attention to Christ. And when we do, we might be in the neighborhood when something unbelievably, extraordinarily important happens. Because in the midst of all of this going back and forth, Hathak, with the messages back and forth through the palace and all this other thing, we have one of the great statements of faith that we wouldn't have if it wasn't for Hathak. Because one of the messages that Mordecai gives to Hathak to repeat to Esther is, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Wow. One of my all-time favorite chunkettes of the Old Testament. Esther, who became an orphan. She didn't do anything wrong. She was raised by a family. She was a nobody that God made into a somebody. And says, "Okay, you're now here. It's no accident you're where you are. This is not a mistake. You have come to your royal position." Hathak repeated these words of Malachi, who then told them to Esther. And through that, the Jews were saved. And we hear this. Hathak, drifts back into obscurity. We hear about Esther. We're grateful for Mordecai. But we don't have any of this without the Hathaks. So, yes?
On that view, when you have the arrivals, that is so perfect for that message because it's arrived.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. I really do, because I don't just throw them up, I actually think about them. But the idea is that wherever you are, you have arrived from someplace, right? Remember what George said? He said, God is more interested in who you're going to become than what you do, right? If I might embellish on what George said, if you'll give me the privilege of doing that. God is more interested in the man or woman of God you're becoming than everything you're doing or the person you were. God is the God of faith. And faith, think about this for a moment. Faith is never in the past. Faith is now and into the future. Faith is not about, because that's news. The past, the good news, right? The good news is about what's already done. But faith is the life I'm living now and where I'm going. And God is saying to you and to me, I want that for you. Do you know your role? Do you know the role? Hathak knew who he was. He had a resume that said eunuch. Can you imagine pulling that out? Imagine sharing, hi, here's my business card. I'm Hathak. I'm a eunuch. I mean, it's like nobody was going to see it. You know, it's like, how did he know? Well, I don't know. You know, maybe they had buttons. I don't know. But he knew his role, and he stayed there. He knew who God wanted him to be, and he was comfortable with that. He was willing to say yes to who God had made him and the role he had him to be. But it also meant he was willing to say no to everything else. I've been going through a bit of a thing. I'm always going through a bit of a thing. But there comes times in at least my life where I think, you know, maybe I deserve something. I want to treat myself. I want to, I just feel like I'm entitled. Now, nobody here probably ever feels like that or says those words to themselves. So I've been exploring buying land and building over near Vero Beach. And part of that was we went and looked at condos over in Vero Beach. And I can't tell you that God spoke from above and said, yo, Chet. No, he didn't do that. But in my heart, in my spirit, soul, whatever part of that is in me, it became evident to me that this wasn't for us. Nothing wrong with condos, nothing wrong with building a house, and there's certainly nothing wrong with Vero Beach. Okay, you got that right. Preach it, brother. But this wasn't for us, or at least not for us at this time. So I had to call the realtor and say, you're a nice guy, you've been very helpful, but for now we're going to pull back. And he was nice. And I'm going to write a letter and all that good stuff. But the point is, there comes a time when you got to say, is that who God made me to be? And that's fine for some people. That's who God made them to be. You know, what was it the Army commercial said, what? Be all you can be. Remember that? That was pretty good. They reeled in a lot of suckers. I mean, cadets that way. They did. Good idea. Know your role. Know the person God has made you to be. And if you don't know who that is, hey, guess what? He wants to tell you. God is not playing poker. Is it okay to say playing poker? Is that okay? All right. When you play cards, what do you do with your cards? You hold them like this, right? God is not doing this to you and to me about who he wants you to be or what he wants you to do. God has an open deck, an open hand. He is reaching out to you and to me, saying, know your role, know the role, how I've made you, your shape, your spiritual gifts, your natural abilities. None of those are mistakes. And we can be comfortable. We can be comfortable. Remember, Jesus told a parable, very famous parable, that the king gave 10 talents, gave 5, 2, 1 talents to these guys. You know what? None of the guys said, only 5? Oh, come on. I'm worth more than that. I can handle more than that, right? No. They gladly, with open hands, received what the king gave them. and worked with it. That's when you get the message, well done, good and faithful servant. So know your role. Know your role. Become a Hathak. Be faithful in the role God's given you. It may seem boring at times. You may say, is anybody listening? Think about the story. Who's listening with Hathak? 2 people, right? Esther and Mordecai. That's it. He didn't have thousands of people hanging on his every word. It was a private message between 2 people. That was his job. And he was faithful. And God used it to save a nation. He can do the same thing with you and me. And if there's a nation that needs saving, isn't it ours? Would you pray with me? Our Father and our God, I thank you that you are the King, the Lord, and you have made us. You have made us well. We are fearfully and we are wonderfully made. That is your promise. You have given us faith in Christ, who has wiped out the slate of all the things I've done, that we have done. You have made us new. You have given us your Spirit. Oh God, I don't think it's that we need more or that I need more. It's that we need to be faithful with what we've got. So use us. Let us be faithful where you've put us with what you've given us, because it's all out of grace and mercy and your love for us. Use us in the neighborhoods where we're at as people are in desperate need. May we be your hand, your voice, your feet. In Jesus' name, amen.